HSIN points to something the mind cannot bear to hear. The seeker is the continuation of seeking. As long as there is someone trying to reach the truth, that very someone is already the barrier itself. Because truth is not an object in front of you. It is not a separate goal. It is not a prize reserved for a self that is purer, calmer, wiser, or more worthy. What you seek cannot be obtained because it is not absent. What you seek is not something a you will hold at the end of the process. It is precisely that without which no process could ever be perceived. It is that which is here before the question, during the anguish, after the attempt, before the name, before the fear, before the narrative. But the mind does not want that. The mind wants to find without disappearing. It wants to awaken without dying as the center. It wants peace without relinquishing the character that suffers. It wants the eternal as personal possession. And that is why it keeps searching outside. Because searching outside preserves the searcher. Perhaps the quietest pain of your life is this: spending years running after what was never lost, only obscured. You look for peace in places, in people, in answers, in changes, in mental states, in spiritual experiences, in signs, in confirmations, in new versions of yourself. And every time something seems at last to promise relief, you move toward it with the same wounded hope of someone who believes that this time they will be able to touch what is missing. But what is missing never allows itself to be touched. What is missing retreats. What is missing changes its name. What is missing puts on another form. And so the mind remains alive precisely because the promise remains distant. This is what you may not yet have realized. Your search is not leading you to the truth. Your search is keeping you far from it. Because everything that can be found outside you can also be lost. Everything that depends on circumstance brings fear. Everything that arrives as an achievement carries the threat of absence, and what you call life is often nothing more than this cycle of pursuit, possession, wear, and emptiness. You call this maturing. Sometimes you call it evolution. Sometimes you call it spirituality. But underneath, there is an exhaustion that does not leave, an ancient fatigue, a weariness that comes not only from tasks or problems or disappointments. It comes from the effort of sustaining an identity that is always trying to complete itself. It comes from the effort of being someone who will finally deserve peace. It comes from the effort of believing there is a future point at which everything will fall into place. And while that point does not arrive, you keep negotiating yourself, adjusting yourself, molding yourself, correcting yourself, comparing yourself, observing yourself, pressuring yourself, watching yourself. The mind promises liberation, but delivers occupation. It promises meaning, but offers movement. It promises arrival, but produces an endless road. Notice the subtle cruelty in this. You say you want rest, but you feed the mechanism that prevents you from resting. You say you want silence, but you cling to the voice that comments on everything. You say you want truth, but you will only accept a truth that does not destroy the image you have of yourself. You want to find something that will soothe your pain, but the very structure of that search is already born from the belief that you are incomplete. And that belief is the engine of everything. You seek love because you feel separate. You seek recognition because you feel insufficient. You seek answers because you feel lost. You seek enlightenment because you feel obscured. You seek God because you believe yourself far from what you could never possibly be distant from. And so an entire life can be wasted trying to touch with the hands what was never an object. Look honestly at your own search. How many times did you think it was just one more step, just one more understanding, just one more experience, just one more encounter, just one more healing, just one more reading, just one more practice, just one more inner confirmation? And for a few moments, there may have been enthusiasm, perhaps even relief. But then the mind returned, and it returned because it does not want the end of suffering. It wants the refined perpetuation of identity. It wants to suffer in a more sophisticated way. It wants to be someone profound, someone conscious, someone awakened, someone special in their inner journey. And in this, there is a silent tragedy. Even spirituality can become an extension of the ego. Even the search for the real can become a flight from the real. Even the attempt to find yourself can be just one more way of not remaining with what is. What is so intolerable about the inside? Why do you keep running outward? Because within, there is no spectacle. Within there is no applause. Within there is no heroic narrative. Within there is no audience. Within there is no image to sustain. Within there is no person you spent so much time trying to improve. Within there is a silence that threatens everything that has been built psychologically. Within there is an emptiness the mind calls absence, when in truth it is freedom. Within there is a presence without form, without biography, without any need for approval. And that is frightening, because identity cannot survive there, as the protagonist. What exists within does not feed the person. What exists within dissolves the person as an imaginary center. That is why so many people prefer familiar pain to faceless truth. They prefer to keep searching, suffering, desiring, comparing, struggling, projecting, interpreting, controlling. Because all of that maintains the feeling that there is someone in command, someone living, someone deciding, someone almost arriving. But when for a moment you stop, truly stop, not as a technique, not as an exercise, not as a method to gain something, but actually stop, something disturbing can be seen. Most of your inner life is nothing but noise trying to avoid the obvious. And the obvious is that what you seek never moved. What moves is the mind. What runs is identity. What dramatizes is thought. Consciousness goes nowhere in order to become itself. You do not find yourself the same way you find a lost key. You do not attain your true nature the way one crosses a finish line. You do not produce the real through effort. You simply stop superimposing fantasy upon what already is. This is the part that disappoints the mind and frees being. There is no trophy at the end. There is no coronation of the self. There is no invisible certificate saying that now you have finally arrived. There is only the collapse of a lie repeated for far too long. The lie that you are this restless, tense, needy, threatened, incomplete, separate center, searching outside for its own wholeness. Observe how the mind turns everything into exteriority. Even when you look within, it wants to make the within into a place, an experience, a special state to be attained. It wants to turn silence into a goal. It wants to turn presence into an achievement. It wants to turn consciousness into an object of perception. But what you are cannot be seen as a thing, because it is that by means of which everything is seen. It cannot be captured by thought, because it is that in which thought appears. It cannot be improved, because every idea of improvement already appears after it. It cannot be threatened, because threat and protection arise within the same passing perception. What you are never entered chaos, although chaos was perceived. It never entered pain as a definitive identity, although pain arose. It was never diminished by failures, nor enlarged by victories. What changes is not you. What changes is the content. What passes is not you. What passes is what appears. But the question keeps burning inside you. If this is true, why does it still hurt so much? Because seeing is not accumulating a beautiful answer. Seeing is allowing the lie to lose its ground, and the lie resists. It resists because it has been called I for too long. It resists because it has been protected, adorned, justified, defended, spiritualized. It resists because every memory, every fear, every hope, every mental habit reinforce the impression of separate individuality. So when truth begins to draw near, what you feel is not always immediate relief. Sometimes it is vertigo. Sometimes it is strangeness. Sometimes it is a sense of helplessness, because what was holding your narrative together begins to loosen. And that is precisely where many people go back to searching outside. They return to distractions, to explanations, to relationships, to goals, to systems, to gurus, to novelties, anything that restores an outline to the character. And yet something in you has already grown tired of this performance. Something in you has already realized that no scenario resolves the fundamental feeling of exile, because that exile was only imagined. Something in you has already seen that the mind promises salvation through movement, but every movement made from lack only reinforces lack. Something in you has already begun to suspect that the problem was never a lack of access to truth, but an excessive attention to the false. That changes everything, because then the question ceases to be, how do I find it? And becomes, what exactly is pretending not to be what it seeks? Who is this that wants to arrive? Who is this that feels distant? Who is this that claims suffering as identity? Who is this that says not yet? When that question is asked seriously, not as a mechanical technique, but as a real cut into illusion, the structure of the self begins to waver. And perhaps that is what you have been avoiding for so long. Not the answer, but the end of the one who answers. Not peace, but the end of the one who wanted to possess it. Not truth, but the collapse of the one who intended to become its owner. Because deep down, there is still the secret hope that you might continue being exactly who you believe yourself to be, and at the same time, live free from suffering. But real freedom is not a comfort offered to the character. It is the revelation that the character was never the center of existence. It appears, it acts, it fears, it desires, it interprets, but it appears. And whatever appears cannot be the ultimate ground of what you are. HSIN insists in different ways on the same cut. What you seek is already present, but not as an object for the mind to possess. This seems too simple, and that is why the mind rejects it. The mind prefers complexity, because complexity keeps it necessary. It prefers long paths, because long paths preserve the walker. It prefers systems, maps, methods, sequences, stages, because all of that sustains the idea of personal progress. But the real does not depend on the progress of the image. The real is prior to the image. The real does not improve when the mind agrees. The real is not revealed because you became more worthy. The real already is. And perhaps the only reason this still seems distant is because you continue expecting truth to arrive with some extraordinary feeling, some inner explosion, some final certainty that satisfies the mind. But truth is often too silent for the ego's taste, too simple for the taste of seeking, too present for the taste of narrative. So stay with this, not as an idea, but as an open wound. Everything you sought outside was doomed to fail, not because it was bad, but because it was incapable of giving you what can only be recognized where you never wanted to remain undefended. Within. Not within as psychological depth, not within as emotion, not within as memory, not within as mental introspection, within as the very formless field in which everything arises, within as that which does not go away when thought goes away, within as that which neither improves nor worsens with experience, within as that which was not born along with your name, within as that which does not depend on being validated, within as that which remains when the search loses its breath and no longer knows where to run. And what if your suffering does not come from the world, but from the insistence on leaving yourself in order to find yourself? And what if all this restlessness is merely the friction produced by that flight? And what if what you call emptiness is not the absence of something, but the absence of the noise that kept the illusion standing? And what if the fear you feel before silence is precisely the proof that silence threatens the fiction you mistook for identity? And what if, in this very instant, without changing anything, without attaining anything, without resolving anything, what you seek is already more intimate than your next breath, more evident than the thought, trying to understand this, closer than the sensation of being someone reading these words. Then what exactly still goes on seeking? And who is it that still believes it must go out in order to find what it never ceased to be? What the mind calls I is, almost always, nothing more than a habit of returning, a reflex, a repeated movement of appropriation. A thought arises, and immediately someone appears saying, "My thought." An emotion arises, and immediately someone appears saying, "My pain." A memory, a shame, a desire, a fear arise, and soon the central fiction takes shape. This is happening to me, but examine it closely, without haste, without violence, without trying to manufacture an answer. This, to me, is where, exactly? At what precise point can it be found? Is it in the body that changes? Is it in the emotion that rises and falls? Is it in the thought that appears and disappears? Is it in the memory that alters every time it is remembered? HSIN points to this crack with almost cruel precision. The personal self is not a solid entity living the experience. It is only a narrative arising within experience. And as long as you do not see this directly, you go on suffering, not only because of pain, but because of the belief that there is someone fixed at its center.